Hello everybody, my name is Christian Quick, and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be talking about animated textures. We're also going to be talking about transparent textures. Now, if I could load the world. If you remember that our texture here, our blocks texture, it's now, I can just change it back to block, just the way it's supposed to be, because I forgot to fix that from the last video. But this is actually a hole, and that is, when we bring it up as an item, it's perfectly fine, but to bring it up as a block, it is not fine. And why is that? Why is it that items get the bypass? So there is something called the server and something called the client. The server is something that everyone can see, and it is attached to the world. So if you are not in the world still exists with all those blocks, and everything that is loaded can be seen. But just with how Minecraft works with transparency stuff, that's why like sometimes when there's some transparent issues, like you can see through blocks. But when it comes to the client is everything on your side of your computer. The reason that resource and texture packs work without it having to be on the server or everyone having them is because they can only be seen on your client. That is a client-side mod. Because that's how the client works, we want the block, the invisible part, the part that we can't see, to be seen by us. Since we place the block, and once we place it in the world is not the client, it's the server. So we need to make sure that when the block is placed, it will also be attached to our client. And the best way we can do this is by making a new Java class in our big folder, the one with your name on it. And we're going to write whatever your mod name is, and then just write client at the end. You could also put client in the front. It really isn't going to hurt anything. But in our regular one, it's just going to be the mod initializer. That's what's get implemented. But in here, we're going to need to implement, and this one's going to be the client mod initializer. So it's basically the same thing. Implement methods on initialize, and then here inside of this is where all the magic happens. So for our blocks that have transparentness to them, I will have to call for something called the block render layer map, and then I'm going to do dot instance dot put block, and then I'm going to say for our mod blocks dot block, because that's the one we're going on, and then we're going to do render layer dot get cutout. And what this is going to do is this is going to put our it's going to put our thing out for the client. Now there does seem to be a problem. In our regular thing, we can see that our HTML3, if I click on it, it's going to say, hey, it is being called here, 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 and here. But if I go into my thing that we just made the client side, it's not being used by anything. So we need to make sure that we have the right instances being used. So because this isn't actually being used, there's only one file that really needs to be updated, and that is our fabricmod.json. And right here we have something called our main, and this is where we are going to be adding a new entry point. We're going to do comma, and then we're going to do this, and it's not going to be called main, it's going to be called client, and it's going to be called client, and it's going to be taking that client folder. So now if we go back into this, it's now going to be implementing that, and it should initialize the client right away. So if we just reopen our world here, that should take care of anything that generally, oh, I may have forgotten something. Hold on, let's pause it, stop it right there. Let's go into our let's go into the mod blocks, and be sure to add that if you have something, oh wow, I actually have it on there. If you want to make sure that something can be seen through, you have to type non-opaque and then hit go. So here we are in our beautiful world. So let's do /give@s, and then we're going to give ourselves that block. And then you can notice that when I place it down, we can actually see through it entirely, or just the part that we exited out. So we now know that that render layer is in fact working. If you are curious what non-opaque means, Non-opaque will still let your block be see-through, but it'll also mean that if anything is pushed against the block, it'll also see through that as well. So non-opaque is let me still be see-through, but let me have my limitations that if the next block that is seeing through is not supposed to be see-through, do not let me see through that block. So it's basically making sure that the back end of the texture has a limit so that the next one can actually be seen. So that is what non-opaque does. This one's going to be a little bit interesting. If I put this on the floor here, it might be a little dark, but if I give myself slash effect give at S, and then I say like night vision, suddenly I can see down in the world quite fine. So we can see all the things in there. So this is actually generally how I made the X-ray block. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the mod that I made, but I do have a mod that I've worked on for more than a year, and one of the blocks that I have is called an X-ray block. Now it is actually a little bit thinner than this, but that is generally how it works. I do not have non-opaque on there, and it does allow me to place and see through the world despite me not generally supposed to be able to. So it is a little bit of hacks. It's also a way to hide blocks too, if you don't want them to be seen. And just for the heck of it, let us control D and let us make a new block. And we're going to call this an animated block. We don't have to go extreme like this, but I want to. So I'm going to make a new block, animated block. And so it is going to have, we're going to take that non-opaque away because we want this to be a regular block. And if you want, you could probably make this, you could probably make this non-opaque if you want, but I'm going to choose for it to be fine. So a couple things that I'm going to be looking at for this animated block. So it does going to need the block state. So every time, I usually will control and then if animated, I basically just copy everything, but then I just have to know that everything on the inside is the same. And then I annoyingly would have to just kind of go through everything. Animated block. This is where, what's it called? Data gen would be useful, but animated block. But for when you're talking to new viewers or people who aren't really good at coding or is new to coding, it's not a very good thing to try and throw harder looking code at them. So I decided to do without it for the tutorial. But those are all the repeated stuff. Let's make a really cool animated block. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to cover 4 pixels like this. And then, so what I want is I somehow hit Control-Z. All right. So let's say I want 4 frames, right? I want 1, 2, 3, 4. And then in the next frame, I want this to turn back to white. I want these next 4 to turn black, and then this will turn white, and then these next 4 will turn black, these 4 will turn back, and then it's going to repeat back at the top. How do I make it animate like that? So you have to account for every frame you want, and then you're going to have to make a texture based on that amount of frames. So we know that a basic block is 16 by 16. So if I use File, and then I do New, and we have 16 is the width, and then the height is going to be 16 times the amount of frames. So let's say I want 4 frames. Well, then this is going to be 64. This is going to be a little bit confusing. So what I'm going to do to separate the frames is I'm going to make what's called a red frame. We're just going to paste this in like here. We're going to control AC, and we're going to control like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this to the top. Make sure that I'm at the top of the texture, and then control V. I'll put one at the bottom, and then I'll make a different colors. So I'll do another one, control, and then I can do it like, oh, didn't mean to do that. Let's fill these in. If I control V, we got another red frame. I just realized I did it okay. But from here, if you have now another frame, we can fill it in, fill this top one in, and then we can work on these frames individually. So like I said, I wanted to try and make it easy as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these first 4, we're going to 1, 2, so we're going to 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then in this next frame here, it's going to be, let's use the white. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to flip it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Flip it again. And then we're going to have our 8 free pixels. From the bottom here, we can easily count it. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. And then for this bottom one, 1, 2, 3, 4, just like this. Cool. So from here, we can use boop, and then let us make little boxes of all of the stuff that we're going to need. And then we can start using the paint bucket, and that is going to make this a lot easier. Just like this. And then we're going to use bucket, fill that in, and then we're going to flip this like that, and then we're going to fill, and then bam. Now we have our 4 frames. It's going to be hard to tell, but it'll be much easier to tell when we have our thing. So we're going to export as, and then we're going to have to call this, well, our little block name. So animated block. I'm going to export it. Export, and then I have to take where it is, where I saved it. There it is. So then I have pictures, and then I have animated block. Now, we did learn that what this is going to do now is it's going to squish it. And if it squishes it, that's not really, we don't want it to squish it into a block. We want it to animate the block. But how do we do that? Well, Minecraft actually does have some animated blocks, so let's take a look at their files and let's look at one of their animated blocks for reference. If you want 2 references, there is going to be the magma block, but that one only has 3 frames. We're going to want one with 4. So let's take a look at, where is it? Textures, block. We're going to look for the Prismarine. And so we have the Prismarine, and then we have this prismarine.png, so basically the name, and then .mcmeta. This mcmeta is what's doing all the magic. So let's bring it into here. We're going to refactor, and then we're going to rename this, and we're going to keep the PNG the same. So this is going to be our animated block. And it's .png, so it's taking the actual full file extension is that mcmeta, and the mcmeta is grabbing this entire animated block, which happens to be .png. So not to be confused about the double file extension, but let's get into what this means. So, interpolate true or false. Interpolate means, do I want this texture to smoothly go from one texture to the next? If I have this turned on, then every 300 ticks, it's going to go from frame 1, and then let's just go, oh yeah, Java always starts at 0, by the way. So, well, yeah, like this. So, frame 0, if I still have this open, yep, frame 0 would be the top one, frame 1 would be that next one, frame 2 would be this, and then frame 3 would be this. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and then it's going to, every 300 ticks, it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. When everything in here is done, it's just going to repeat all the way. What I was saying about interpolate is it knows that this is going to be the top one, and that this black is turning white, and then these next 4 pixels are going to be turning black. So what it's going to do with interpolate on is it's going to turn this black into gray into white, and it's going to this white into gray into black, and then as it goes on to the next frame, it's going to, so it would turn this white into black into white again because there's that 3rd frame. So let's take a look at the difference between them being on, and just for the heck of it, I'm going to turn down the frames a lot. So 20 ticks is 20 ticks a second. So if I said that this is 1 second, every second it's going to change, which is perfectly fine. This would be 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, and then 5 seconds. So they originally had it set to 300, which is every 15 seconds it will change from one frame to the next with interpolate on. And then for us, what we're going to do is we're going to say 20 ticks. So for every second, um, let's do every 2 seconds because we're going to have the interpolate on. And then let's reload it and see how the animation looks from here before we start putting some fancy editing on it either. So let's give ourselves /give at s, and then we have our animated block. Oh, it seems that I have made a mistake. So I know right away that it's going to be in the model because the model points to the texture, and I said point to block, and I needed to point to animated block. So lesson learned, if you have that issue, and where it's pointing to a different texture, always check your models first because your model immediately points to the texture. I also made the same mistake in my inventory. I did not update the inventory one, so I did that too. But right now, because I did it after I restarted it, my inventory hotbar is still going to be the wrong texture. But here we go. We can notice like what I was trying to tell you. It's going to turn black. It's going to turn gray to black. It's going to go on to the next one. And it kind of looks a little funny because it's trying to do it as smooth as possible. Which is perfectly fine, I guess. So trying to keep everything cool and symmetrical, we have learned that just by looking at it, I don't know if you noticed, so it's always going to do the top, for the top of the block, it's going to go up, down, depending on what the north side is. But then if you look at the sides of the blocks, they're kind of going like, they're putting it sideways. And let's say I wanted to organize it in a way that was like, looks really good. So for that first frame, you'll see what I mean in a second. I'm going to go lighter, and then we'll go for an extreme texture, but there's going to be a lot of stuff clipped out, so you'll see what it looks like, but we'll skip on to it. But for this, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there should be 4 for here. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill this in. And so the first frame is basically going to look like this. That second frame, we're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, just like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then this should be this frame all completed. Making sure that I counted right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Correct. And then we're 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. And then we're going to fill in these spaces like so. And then lastly, we're going to go all the way up. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to go all the way up to 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to go all the way up and right, and then we can easily fill this in. And this is going to look more interesting. So let's export as animated block. So I'm going to export it like this. And this is going to be a lot more. I think this would be a lot more imaginable. Let's turn interpolate to false, because it's either going to have to be true or false. Let's set it to be a little bit faster as well. And then we still have this old block on here, so let's make sure that we pictures. Let's make sure that we actually update the animated block as well. Overwrite. That's how I know it's the right one. And then we're going to refresh the screen, or refresh the So here we have a block that is kind of going around like a Christmas present, dare I say. There does seem to be moments where it doesn't look like it is connecting all the way, which is kind of unfortunate. Another thing is when you look at the item, or the block in the world, so the textures are always connected, but then if you watch in my hotbar, the textures almost never seem connected. So that's a little something. What is interesting about the textures with the thing is that you can claim it by frame in any order. So you can be smarter with your frames. So I actually cut my frames in half, where normally, I mean, if it was just a texture, I would go all the way forward, and then I would have to put a reflected texture back until I was at the very beginning, and then have it start top to bottom. Or I can cut it in half and then say to go backward in order. And what I mean is, let's export this and go into the file so I can show you. We have our animated block. We can shove it in here and override it. And now we have a much better animated block in which we have frame 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So animated block will have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then to save our time, we could simply just write down all of our, like this, 1, and then instead of typing 0, because what'll happen is when it hits to 1, it's going to restart from the top because it has now hit the bottom of the list. So if I hit 0, it's going to do 0, come back to the top and do 0 again. It's going to go all the way down to 1 and stop and restart at 0, and it's going to be like that. So from our ticks, I think you can actually make it even smaller than 20. 20 is just an exact second. But like, let's say I wanted this to happen. I mean, I'm just going to say 2. So that is like within a tenth of a second. You know, or I could say like 4. Could I say 4? If I said 5, that'd be a fourth of a second. I could say 4, which would be a different fraction, but we could say 2. Let's say 5, and let's just watch what happens. It's only a fourth of a second per frame change, so if you really wanted to, you could make an entire, because you can actually extend your frames, but the amount of like work you would need to do per frame is just ridiculous that, you know, I wouldn't recommend, you know, normally, but it is what it is. Uh-oh. My animated block is not working. As a very important note, please remember that when you are making one of these, to make sure that the bottom one does not have a comma, while everything else above it does. The code will not tell you that there is a problem here with a comma, but there needs to not be a comma there. That way, it'll tell the animation that this has now ended, and then it'll know to restart. Otherwise, comma will say that this is not ended, and also does not have a frame, and so it does not know what frame to put it to. So then it'll break the animation. So make sure that if you have the last frame does not have a comma for this to work. Beyond that, if we go back into our mod that I have now reloaded completely, here we can see we have a new and improved animated block that I took probably way too much time developing. But once you get into the flow of animated blocks, they're pretty interesting to flow out. I think what's also really cool about them is that if you make them have a seamless texture, they're quite interesting to when they work together. But that's my personal opinion. So you can tell me your thoughts on the animated block in the comments below, or if you just like simple transparency. This is what people use to make things like windows and other stuff like that. But if you have any questions, you can ask me down in the comments below. But that seems that it's going to wrap up this video. If you have any questions, go for it. But if not, well, that is going to be the last part of this video for textures, and then we can move on to, I think, lang files is the next one. I have a list of stuff, trust me, I do have a list. How good is that stuff? Heavily debatable. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video. So, thank you guys so much for watching, and without further ado,